Hey everyone, this is Lady C. Welcome to Hidden Struggles. And today's guest is someone I personally admire. I mean, she's a fighter, an advocate, a speaker, and a survivor. This is the first conversation in a three-part series where she's going to be talking about what it was like growing up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, the identity struggles, the silence, and the challenge of leaving when you know deep down it's no longer your truth. Please join me in welcoming Daria to Hidden Struggles.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me on the platform. But basically, I was pretty much raised as a Jehovah's Witness. My mother and father became Jehovah's Witnesses back in the late 70s and early 80s. First, my mother, and my dad was a few years later. And when my mother got baptized, I was six. And it was a very interesting experience because I remember one of the principals at the school, she took an interest in me and my siblings, and she told my mother, she said, "You are raising leaders within an environment where there aren't many leaders. So they're leaders in a small group, which can be a challenge for you." And it's true. My parents raised us to get good grades, to be independent, to be high achievers. But then you've got the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses that continues to diminish that part of you. And they really don't want you to have an identity other than the identity that they want you to have, because then you conform to what that organization needs, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of contradiction there. And so there's friction because innately you want to do this, you want to do this, you have these goals, you have these interests, but then your religion that your parents are raising you in, and you want to be a good child, you want to be a good daughter, a good teenager, all of the things, it's telling you, well, you can't be in student government, you can't necessarily go to college. And then my parents were like, you're going to get a skill. So I started out in community college, like a lot of young people. But I had bigger aspirations than that. And so many of us who were raised in this religion had bigger aspirations than the limited scope that you were given within this construct.
So then, when you left the organization, how difficult was it for you to pick up the pieces to get to the other side of what you knew you should have been doing all the while?
Whew, okay, so, it's really interesting because when I really think about it, leaving Watchtower was not difficult at all. Now, there were some ways that I had to go about it that were challenging because of the constructs of the religion. I knew that if I just cold turkey said deuces, I'm out, that I could lose my family. So I knew how to be savvy enough to tell them, I just been taking a break the past 3 months. I'm tired. I've been through a lot. I'm here in New York. I'm trying to rebuild my life. I'm exhausted. So I'm just taking a break. I knew how to say things like that so that I could gradually fade as I learned later on once I got familiar with certain behaviors being an ex Jehovah's Witness. I learned that fading out was a thing, right? I didn't know that that's what I was doing when I did it. I just knew, okay, I can't disconnect from my parents and I can't have them freaking out per se, but I'm done. Also, I've told you this, I was never going to be a great Jehovah's Witness because there were so many parts of it that I just didn't subscribe to. I was never going to be someone that was shunning someone and not talking to someone. I never understood that whole disfellowshipping thing. I also never ever wanted to be a regular pioneer. I never wanted to go to Bethel. All of those things seem like a vow of poverty to me. That wasn't something that I wanted for myself. And it never really computed for me, okay, they don't want us to go to college. They want us to get a skill per se, but they want us to preach full time. But how am I going to take care of myself? You know, and it just never made sense. And then at that time in the 90s, there was a huge economic downturn. manufacturing jobs were on the decline. And the area of the country where I come from in the Midwest, manufacturing was gold. That was key. So there was a huge economic shift in that area. So a lot of the friends were taking buyouts so that they could pioneer. And a lot of them were starting cleaning companies and doing things like that. And it just looked ridiculous to me. It didn't make sense. I'm like, what are these people doing? Even if, okay, they're taking a buyout, but maybe they should get another skill. Maybe they should be going back to school to get something. How are they going to? I didn't, I was young, but I was old enough to process, I don't know about this. I knew that. And the same thing held true for my siblings. Now, my parents are unique because they still knew that education had value and it was important. And so by some way, somehow, I went to community college. My brother ended up going to the local campus of a prestigious state college. And so did I eventually. I started out at community college and transferred there, but I didn't finish. And then my sister, she went to the big campus of this elite university away. And it was a thing. The elders, they questioned my father about it. I don't even know if my dad remembers this, but they literally questioned him about promoting higher education.
I feel like when you're in these high control religions or people that just don't want you to grow, a lot of times they use it as an excuse to keep you down because they know that the moment you get into this education, this realm of education, they know that you might not be coming back to the Kingdom Hall because
That's right.
you know what I'm saying? Because
That's
I
absolutely
remember,
right.
I'm telling you, when I was working at the time, it was a big six accounting firm. One of the partners that I work for at this company, he looked at me, he said, have a seat. He wanted me to sit down because he saw my potential, right? And he said, listen, he said, you look like he goes, you are too intelligent to be part of something like this, right? So as he's telling me this is the people that you're gonna be rubbing shoulders with when you in school, when you're working in a business office and things like that. People are gonna see your potential, and they're gonna see that you are smarter than this religion that you belong to. And at the time, I was so closed off from that. But if
Yeah,
I was still around that all the time, I can only imagine how if I was just hanging around people who thought like that and not just being closed-minded to being around my Jehovah's Witness friends, I could have probably left this religion way, earlier than what I did. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely, absolutely. And so to that point, there's this thing called group think, and that is what Watchtower wants. When you learn different topics that say have nothing to do with your concentration when you're in school, your focal area of study, what happens in that process is you learn more about yourself. You learn who you are. And to me, that's the bigger issue. And when you think about the way that Watchtower is designed, the way that doctrine is constructed, the way that everything is set up, the framework, it is designed so that you never learn who you are. And so, a lot of times, often when people wake up and come up out of this religion, one of the reasons why they are so devastated is because they realize I'm 30, 40 years old and I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what my interests are. Well, part of that, you have to give yourself some grace and not be so down on yourself and disappointed in yourself because that was the intention. So when you decide that you want to learn who you are, that's why I feel that education is so important. It's not just about going to college to get a good job, it's about going to college for self discovery.
Now, I like what you said about self-discovery because I feel like I did all these audiobooks and I must have did about 50 memoirs of different people's experiences and life experiences. And it was so interesting because if I wouldn't have done those books, I would not know what I know today. And it just gave me a whole different perspective on how people live. Because I was raised in a certain environment, being in the world of witnesses, I didn't know how different people lived in different environments,
That's
and I
right.
got a chance to see everything up close and personal. A lot of stuff was fictional, and some stuff was nonfiction, but most of it was
Absolutely.
fictional.
Self discovery comes through reading, self discovery comes through travel, self discovery comes through the arts and exploring. And whether it's in movies, film, theater, all of these areas are areas where Watchtower tries to control what you consume.
Hmm.
All of these areas. And it's just so interesting to me because we are in an area of society where globalization has impacted every aspect of our lives. We are more connected globally than ever before. And I don't think that and technology, the internet, that is something that they didn't bank on in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They did not
Right.
bank on it. As a matter of fact, when I was still going to the Kingdom Hall, they were very anti looking at things on your tablet. So, these movies, these books, this literature, this art, these are areas where you can learn more about yourself. And that's what you did when you discovered Audible and started reading. It opened you up to learning about human experiences that, if not for you doing that and being in this siloed environment, you never would have learned. And I think that that is the intention of Watchtower. They really want to control everything that you do, what you consume. And that's why, even from a study perspective and studying scripture, what I'm fascinated with at this point in 2025 more than anything is when I was a Jehovah's Witness, there was this intention to at least appear like they were doing a deep study of the scriptures. I know now that I wasn't, because everything that I used to study was Watchtower based, right? And anything that they referenced that wasn't from their publications was something that they cherry picked or curated to fit whatever teaching they were trying to push, right? Or whatever doctrine that they wanted to get support for. But a real study of scripture or of any belief system is one that is rooted in looking at numerous sources. That's why you have something called, in higher education, you have something called peer reviewed research, which means that this is a topic, a paper, an article that has been reviewed by several persons with several different backgrounds to draw a conclusion that is more balanced, right? And that's not what you have with Watchtower. So to me, it all aligns, the fact that they want to control what you listen to, what you read, where you go, how you dress, how you groom yourself, all of these things, even sadly, what you do in your bedroom with your husband or wife or your partner. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so it's really about control. And I think that as an organization, they're losing control. They've lost control. People have left this religion in droves. I mean, they're just bleeding membership, and especially when COVID happened. And so I think that for people that are waking up and coming up out of this, young, middle-aged, young, old, older, the key is to be open to learning, unlearning, letting go, be intentional about letting go of that judgmental spirit and that judgmental mindset. Be open to taking on new perspectives, because that's how you grow and that's how you figure out who you are and how you want to show up in the world.
All right, that wraps up the first conversation in my three-part series with Daria. Her story really shows how leaving is just the beginning of finding yourself. In our next part, she's going to open up about what happens when that new voice refuses to stay quiet Now, you can catch part 2 right here when it's live. And in the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified when part 2 is published. This has been Lady C, and I'll see you in the next episode.